So let's begin with the object-oriented programming. Class and object forms the basic part of any object-oriented programs. Now, what is basically object-oriented programming? There are two types of programming. Rather, there are three types of programming, we can say. Uh, Number one, if we can mention the types of programming, then we can say that the very first type of programming is called procedural programming. Procedural programming. In this programming style, we concentrate on functions like in C programming. What we do when the program starts getting bigger, we divide the large program into smaller parts, and each part performs a particular task that is called procedural programming. Then the second type of programming is called object-oriented programming. Now, what is object-oriented programming? We recognize all the objects that are involved in the system. Whatever system we want to computerize, like suppose we want to make program for a banking system. So we first identify what are the objects involved in that system. So in a bank, we can say that there will be customers. Every customer will have an account. Then there will be different types of account. There will be staff. So all those objects which are involved in the system, we create different variables and different functions for each of these objects, and then put these objects in a group that is called class. And each class represents different objects related to one particular class. Class is for classification of a large program into smaller programs. So we'll be discussing that in detail. And the third programming language style is event-driven programming or Windows programming. So event-driven programming is where each user gets a screen, window-based screen, and there are buttons, there are combo boxes, there are menus, and each of these items which are visible to the user can click them and perform some tasks. So in Java, we do object-oriented programming and we also do event-driven programming. We'll see both of these. But for now, we'll be concentrating on class and object-oriented programming. So in object-oriented programming, we classify objects of a system. So in object-oriented programming, when we discuss object-oriented programming, let me cut this and paste it here. When we concentrate on object-oriented programming, what happens is, let us try to understand. Suppose we have a banking system that needs to be computerized. So in a banking system, first of all, what are the different objects? Then the staff will be object, all the customers will be object, their accounts will be object. So basically, if we consider banking system, these are some of the objects which we can recognize. Now, concentrate on the staff. So what we do, we have identified that there will be a staff, then there will be customers, okay, and then each customer will have some accounts. So there are three types of objects involved in the banking system. Now for the staff, what are the information that we need to store? So for the staff, we need a staff ID, we need a staff name, we need a staff designation, we need a staff mobile number, and all this information which we require. So these are the informations of the staff, and what these staffs will do. So these staffs will perform open account. This is the first task, which the first function which this staff will perform. Then the second function that the staff will perform will pay interest or calculate interest. So this is the second work that will be done by the staff. Then the third work that will be done by the staff is suppose void check balance in customers account. Okay, so this is the third task that will be performed by the staff. The fourth task will be accept money to deposit in the account. We go to the bank, we give money, and that money is deposited in our account. So what we do whenever we try to write a program that is object-oriented program, we first try to identify the objects, and then what we do, we identify what are the informations related to that object. These are the variables, and then we identify what are the functions that particular staff will perform. So these are the functions. So now we will give data type to each of these variable. Name will be of a string type, then a designation will be of a string type, then this will be mobile number will be of a string type, and okay, so this first group of object will be represented by the name staff, and we declare it this way. So first object has been converted into a class. So what is a class? Now you can see class is representing one type of object in the system. So all staff will be represented by this staff class, and all staff will have their ID, their name, their designation, their mobile. The staffs will perform the following function. Now the second group is customers. So first of all, we identify what are the values we will be requiring to store related to customer. Then first information will be account number. Whenever we open account, we get an account number. Okay. Then the name of the customer, then the address of the customer, then the type of the account that the customer has opened. So these are some of the information that will be required in the system. Now, what these customers will be doing in the bank? So they'll be opening account. They'll open the account. Okay. Then what will they do? They will submit or deposit amount in the bank. They can also check balance and withdraw amount. So they can also provide check balance in their account, and they can probably withdraw some amount, deposit amount, and then withdraw amount. So the customers can also withdraw amount. So these are the informations and functions performed by the customer. So this is the second class. This second class is called customer, and all the customers will be represented by this class. So how we write our object-oriented programs? This is the approach. First, we need to identify what are the objects. So we identified that the staff. There are some staff in the bank. There are some customers in the bank, and for staff, we want to store their ID, their name, their designation, their mobile number. Similarly, for customers, we'll have account number, name, address, account type, and they'll be performing these functions. So this is how we create object-oriented programs. In procedural programming, in C style of programming, we do not concentrate on objects. Rather, we concentrate on the functions that the system will be performing as a whole, and divide all the parts of the programs into different functions. But the limitation there is that if we declare some variable as global, then that will be accessed by all the functions. And if we declare some variables as local, then only one particular function will be accessing that variable. But when we form classes, then all these functions that belongs to the staff will access these variables. All those functions which belongs to the customer will access their own variables. So these four variables for the customers are global for these four functions, and these variables of the staff are only accessible to the staffs. So this limitation was there in C, because in C we cannot make some variables global for certain function and some variable global for certain function. This is only possible with the help of class and object. So this is how we write object-oriented programs, and this is what we call as object-oriented programming. So what is object-oriented programming? Whenever we write programming in which the system is developed using class and object is called object-oriented programming. So in object-oriented programming, the mandatory thing is that we have to create classes and objects. Object-oriented programming. And the system developed is called the object-oriented programming system. The system developed using object-oriented programming is called object-oriented programming system. So this is a template for similar objects, and it is a collection or a group of variables and functions. It is, you can say, a derived data type, because we make a class using the basic data types, and we can declare some variables of this type. The variable of class contains each class members. Each variable of the class contains class members, that is variables and functions, and the object or the instance of the class is called the instance of variable of class type is called object. A class can have multiple objects, and to call or invoke functions in the class, we create objects. So let us see what does this mean. Now this is a small program. In this program we have a function f1. This prints f1 only. We have a function f2. This prints f2. Now to call this f1 and f2, we first have to create an object of this class example1. So example1 here is a class. In this class, we have two functions, f1 and f2. And to call these functions, to use these functions, first of all, we have to create an object of the class. So to create the object of the class, we write, this is the syntax. In C, we do not write this part. We only write example, obj, and semicolon, and the object is created. Here we write example obj1 equals to new example1. New keyword is used to create an object. The same object can be also created in two steps. Suppose we write it this way. Example1 is the class name, and suppose obj2 is the object name. So we can declare in one line, and then we can write obj2 equals to new example1. So this is also one way of creating object. So we can create object in one line. We can create object in two lines. This is one way of creating an object. This is the first way to create an object. And this is the second way to create an object in two steps. In Java, there are two ways in which we can create object. First is we are declaring the instance and instantiating it at the same time. And in the second, we are first declaring the object and then we are instantiating it. When we declare the object, when we write ex1 obj2, then this is just a memory pointer which does not contain any particular memory for all the variables and functions it will hold. When we instantiate it, when we use the new keyword, then the memory is allocated. Until unless new keyword is used, memory is not allocated. That means the object is not completely built in the memory. So if we do not use instantiation like this, if we do not do the instantiation, and if we want to call obj2.f1, then it will give error because the object is not complete. The complete object creation requires instantiation as well as declaration. So first it is declared and then it is instantiated. So this is how we can create object. Once the object is created, we can call the functions. So this is the first object. Suppose this is obj1. So the object 1 can call its function. And similarly, since we have two objects, so object 2 can also call the functions. Obj2 dot we can write this way. And similarly, we can call obj2 dot f2. So this is how we can create object. This is obj2. So what is a class? Again, you can see that class is a group of variables and functions. Here in this class, we have two functions. And to call the functions, we have to create the object. Object is created in two steps, and then we can call the function. So if we run this program, it will first say obj1.f1, we call f1 and 2. Similarly, obj2, we call f1 and 2. So we'll get the output and other programs output. So basically, class is a group of variables and functions. It represents a class of object, a group of object. Each class will have some variables and functions representing the objects. The variables stores the information of the object, and functions tell us what are the work that will be done by the object. And when we create programs using classes and object, it is called object-oriented program. The system that is developed in this method is called object-oriented programming system. And this is how we can run the program. There are some issues with my Visual Studio at the moment. That's very good. I'll stop it. I'll come to the second example. Just to have an idea, rather, I'll come to another example. Now, here you can see in this program, we have a class student. Then each student will be having their roll number and name. We have input function that will take the value of the roll and name from the user. And then we have a show function to display the name and roll number of the user. Now, this is student class. This is student class that is starting from line number 2 ends at 18. And in the main function, we are creating object of the student class. And with the help of that object, we are calling the function input and the show. Let me try once again if this program can be executed. So if it runs, then it will ask for the roll number and the name. Okay, it is running. We'll enter the name of the student, will enter the roll number of the student, and then it will print. It is asking for the name. Suppose I enter Rahul. Then it will ask for roll number. Suppose I enter 1. So this is the input function called. Now it is printing. That is the output function called. So in this way, we create classes and objects in our program. I'll show you once again. This is a class. Student is a class. In this student class, we have two variables that will store the information of the student, roll and name. And then we have two functions, the input function and the show function. The input function takes the input from the user, and the show function displays the roll and name of the student. Now, this object, std1, std is one object. Now, suppose we have two students. So we'll declare it. This will hold the information for student number one. And now we can declare another variable of class, that is another object. Similarly, so because there can be many students, we can declare an array of students. We can declare multiple variables of a student type. So this will be student 2, and we'll have the input and output for the student 2 as well. So in this way, we can create multiple objects, multiple representing more than one student, and we can call the functions to perform the task. So we have a student class. In this student class, we have variables and functions. We create the object of the student class, and then we call the functions of the student class. So this is how we do the object-oriented programming in Java. I'll stop it here, and if you have any question, we'll try to discuss some questions so that your difficulty can be also sorted out.